The rain drummed steadily against the windows as Michael Turner sat on the edge of Lily's small bed, their favorite storybook open in his lap. The warm glow of her butterfly nightlight cast dancing shadows on the walls of their modest apartment. "Just one more chapter, Daddy," Lily pleaded, her blue eyes wide and hopeful. She clutched her worn teddy bear close to her chest, fighting to keep her eyes open. Michael smiled and brushed a strand of blonde hair from her forehead. "Not tonight, sweetie. You need your rest, and Daddy has to work a little more." "But it's Friday," she pouted, though her eyes were already heavy with sleep. "I know, baby. But remember those new school supplies we talked about? This extra shift will help us get everything you need." He tucked the blanket around her shoulders and kissed her forehead. "Mrs. Martinez from next door will check on you while I'm gone." Lily yawned. "Will you be here when I wake up?" "First thing in the morning, I promise." "We'll make pancakes together." Michael switched off the bedside lamp, leaving only the soft purple glow of the nightlight. "Sweet dreams, my angel." "Love you, Daddy," Lily murmured, already drifting off. Michael lingered in the doorway, watching his daughter's peaceful face. His heart ached with love and worry, the constant companions of a single parent. Since losing Sarah to cancer 3 years ago, every decision, every dollar, every moment revolved around giving Lily the best life he could manage. In the kitchen, he quickly changed into his delivery uniform. A red polo shirt with the Pizza Palace logo that had seen better days. His phone buzzed with a text from his boss. "Delivery to 1542 Maple Heights Drive." Michael grimaced. That was in the wealthy part of town, where houses looked like small castles and people rarely tipped well. He grabbed his keys and jacket, then headed down to the parking lot where his old Honda waited faithfully. The car protested with a rough start before settling into its familiar rumble. The windshield wipers squeaked across the glass, fighting against the steady rain. As Michael navigated through the quiet streets, his mind wandered to the stack of bills waiting at home. Lily's school had announced a new technology fee, and her winter boots were getting too small. The extra shift would help, but it never seemed enough. The houses grew larger as he crossed into the affluent side of town. Perfectly manicured lawns stretched behind iron gates, security cameras watching his every move. Finally, he turned onto Maple Heights Drive and felt his stomach drop at the sight of number 1542. The mansion rose like a mountain before him, all stone and gleaming windows, with perfectly trimmed topiaries lining the circular driveway. Light spilled from every window, and he could see elegantly dressed figures moving inside. Through the rain, classical music drifted faintly from the house. Michael parked near the service entrance and gathered the stack of pizzas from his passenger seat. His worn sneakers squeaked against the marble steps as he approached the massive front door. Before he could ring the bell, a uniformed butler opened it, regarding Michael with thinly veiled disdain. "Delivery for the Shaw residence?" Michael said, trying to stand straighter despite his rain-dampened clothes. The butler stepped aside with a curt nod. "This way!" Michael followed him into an entrance hall bigger than his entire apartment. A crystal chandelier cast rainbow sparkles across marble floors so polished he could see his reflection. The sounds of laughter and conversation drifted from what appeared to be a ballroom just ahead. As they entered the grand space, conversation stuttered to a halt. Dozens of faces turned to stare at Michael in his soggy uniform, holding his stack of pizza boxes. Women in cocktail dresses whispered behind their hands. Men in expensive suits raised their eyebrows. Michael felt his face grow hot. He'd delivered to wealthy homes before, but something about this party's reaction felt different, almost as if they recognized him. He focused on keeping his voice steady as he asked the butler, "Where would you like these?" Before the butler could answer, a small voice cut through the awkward silence. "Mommy says you're my daddy." Michael turned toward the sound. A young boy, maybe 7 years old, stood clutching the uniform of a maid. His dark hair fell across his forehead in a familiar way, and his eyes— Michael's breath caught in his throat. They were Lily's eyes, down to the same shade of blue. The pizza boxes nearly slipped from Michael's hands. He barely noticed when someone took them from him, his attention fixed on the child who could have been Lily's twin. The boy's words echoed in his head. "Mommy says you're my daddy." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. The elegant party guests drew back, creating a circle of space around Michael and the boy. The classical music played on, an absurd backdrop to this surreal moment. Then the crowd parted again, and a woman stepped forward. Michael's heart stopped. Rebecca Shaw. But she wasn't Rebecca Shaw when he'd known her. She had been Rebecca Martinez, his high school sweetheart, the girl he'd planned to marry before she'd suddenly left town without explanation. She looked different now, more sophisticated in her designer dress, her dark hair elegantly styled, but her eyes were the same, and they filled with tears as she looked at him. "Michael," she whispered, her voice carrying in the hushed room. Michael stood frozen, his world tilting on its axis. The boy, Daniel, according to the name embroidered on his little suit jacket, continued to stare at him with those familiar eyes that matched Lily's perfectly, eyes that now brimmed with hope and curiosity. The rain continued to drum against the mansion's windows, but Michael barely heard it over the roaring in his ears. In this opulent room, surrounded by strangers in expensive clothes, he felt the foundations of his world shifting beneath his feet. Every sacrifice, every late night, every struggle of the past 8 years suddenly took on new meaning as he looked between Rebecca and the boy who might be his son. Rebecca's hand trembled as she grasped Michael's arm, guiding him away from the shocked whispers of the dinner party guests. The pizza boxes in his hands felt impossibly heavy as she led him through the mansion's ornate hallway into a dimly lit parlor. Dark wood panels lined the walls, and plush leather chairs surrounded an antique coffee table. "Please sit down," Rebecca said softly, taking the pizza boxes from his numb fingers and setting them aside. Her elegant black dress rustled as she perched on the edge of a leather armchair across from him. Michael sank into the chair, his worn work uniform feeling completely out of place against the expensive leather. His mind raced with the image of that little boy's face, so much like Lily's, down to the same slight dimple in his chin. "Rebecca," he managed, his voice hoarse. "What's going on?" Rebecca's fingers twisted together in her lap. The diamond ring she wore caught the light from the crystal chandelier above. "I'm so sorry, Michael. I never meant for you to find out this way." She drew a shaky breath. "Daniel, he's your son." The words hit Michael like a physical blow. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, head spinning. "My son?" His throat felt tight. "How? Why didn't you tell me?" "I found out I was pregnant 2 months after you left for college," Rebecca explained, her voice thick with emotion. "My parents were furious. They said you'd never be able to provide the kind of life they wanted for their grandchild." She wiped at her eyes. "Then I met James Shaw. He was kind, successful, established. He offered to marry me, to raise the baby as his own. So you just erased me." Michael's hands clenched into fists. The image of Lily reading alone in her room, longing for a sibling, flashed through his mind. All these years, she'd had a brother she never knew about. "I was young and scared," Rebecca admitted. "James promised Daniel would have everything, the best schools, opportunities, security, things I wasn't sure you could provide back then." She looked down at her hands. "I know now that was wrong. Money isn't everything." Michael stood up abruptly, pacing the expensive Persian rug. 7 years, he said, his voice raw. 7 years I could have been his father, getting to know him, watching him grow up. He turned to face Rebecca. "Does he know about me?" "I've always kept a picture of you," Rebecca said quietly. "I couldn't bear to completely hide the truth. A few months ago, after James passed away, I started telling Daniel about you. He's such a sensitive, observant child. He knew something was missing in his life." Michael ran a hand through his hair, remembering the boy's whispered words in the foyer. His son. He had a son. And now? Why tell him about me now? Rebecca stood, taking a tentative step toward him. "Because it's time for the truth. James is gone, and Daniel deserves to know his real father." Her eyes filled with tears. "I've seen how you've raised Lily. What an amazing father you are. I want that for Daniel too. I want him to know you." Hope bloomed unexpectedly in Michael's chest. He thought of Lily's lonely birthday parties, her quiet wishes for a sibling. You'd let me be part of his life? Yes, Rebecca nodded, a small smile breaking through her tears. I want us to figure this out, Michael. For Daniel's sake, and, she hesitated, maybe for all of us. The warmth of possibility started to spread through Michael's chest. His son, a brother for Lily, a chance to know this little boy who shared his blood, maybe even... The heavy front doors of the mansion suddenly burst open, the sound echoing through the hallway. Sharp voices carried into the parlor, making Rebecca stiffen. Rebecca? Where are you? A commanding female voice rang out. The staff said there was some sort of disturbance. 3 people swept into the parlor, their expensive clothes and imperious expressions marking them clearly as members of the Shaw family. The eldest woman, her silver hair swept into an elegant updo, fixed Michael with an icy stare that took in his pizza delivery uniform with obvious distaste. What, she said coldly, is going on here? Rebecca straightened her spine, but Michael could see her hands trembling. The Shaw family's calculating gazes moved between them, their expressions growing harder with each passing second. The weight of their judgment filled the room like a physical presence, crushing the fragile hope that had just begun to take root. The ornate sitting room felt like it was closing in around Michael. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and expensive artwork lined the walls. He stood awkwardly beside Rebecca, still in his pizza delivery uniform, facing 3 stern-faced members of the Shaw family. This is ridiculous, Rebecca, said Eleanor Shaw, the family matriarch. Her silver hair was pulled into a tight bun, and her pearl necklace gleamed in the warm light. What were you thinking, letting this delivery man into our home? Rebecca's shoulders tensed. Michael is Daniel's father. He has every right to be here. Father? James Shaw, Rebecca's brother-in-law, let out a harsh laugh. His expensive suit rustled as he paced the Persian rug. A real father provides for his child. What can this man possibly offer Daniel? Michael's face burned, but he kept his voice steady. I may not have much money, but I know how to love a child. I've raised my daughter alone since my wife passed. Oh, how touching, Eleanor's voice dripped with sarcasm. And I suppose you think you can just walk in here and claim our grandson? After 7 years of absence? I didn't even know he existed, Michael said quietly. His hands clenched at his sides. If I had known... If you had known what? James interrupted. You would have swooped in with your minimum wage job and your beat-up car to give him the life he deserves? Rebecca stepped forward, her eyes flashing. That's enough. Michael is a good man. He works hard, he's kind, and Daniel deserves to know his real father. The 3rd Shaw family member, Victoria, who had been silently watching, finally spoke. Her voice was soft but dangerous. Think carefully about what you're doing, Rebecca. Your position in society, your reputation, everything the Shaw name has given you could disappear. Are you threatening me? Rebecca's voice shook slightly. Merely stating facts, dear, Eleanor said smoothly. We will fight for full custody of Daniel. No judge in their right mind would choose a pizza delivery man over a respected family who can provide every advantage. Michael's chest tightened. He thought of Daniel's small face, so similar to Lily's. You can't just... We can and we will, James cut in. Our lawyers are already being contacted. I suggest you leave now, before you embarrass yourself further. Rebecca reached for Michael's arm, but he gently pulled away. The weight of their words pressed down on him like a physical force. He turned toward the door, needing air, needing to escape their judgmental stares. As he stepped into the marble-floored hallway, quick footsteps followed him. Then small arms wrapped around his waist from behind. Don't leave me, Daddy, Daniel whispered, his face pressed against Michael's back. Michael's heart cracked. He turned and knelt down to Daniel's level, looking into eyes that mirrored his own. The boy's fancy clothes couldn't hide the trembling of his lower lip. Hey, buddy, Michael said softly, placing gentle hands on Daniel's shoulders. I'm not leaving you. Not really. I promise I'll come back. They're mean sometimes, Daniel confided in a whisper. I don't want them to make you go away. Michael swallowed hard. Listen to me, Daniel. Sometimes grown-ups disagree about things, but that doesn't change how we feel inside. I just found out I'm your dad, and that makes me very happy. Daniel's arms tightened around Michael's neck. I knew it was you. Mommy has a picture she looks at sometimes when she's sad. Michael blinked back tears, hugging his newly discovered son. I promise you, Daniel. I'll come back. We'll figure this out. The drive home felt endless. Rain streaked across his windshield, and his thoughts tumbled over each other like stones in a river. The Shaw's threats echoed in his mind, mixing with Daniel's plea and Rebecca's defending words. When he finally pulled into his driveway, he noticed the living room light was still on. His heart sank. Lily should have been asleep hours ago. He found her curled up on the couch in her favorite unicorn pajamas, her stuffed elephant clutched tight. She sat up when he entered, her young face concerned. Daddy? Why do you look so sad? Michael crossed the room and gathered her into his arms, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. She hugged him back fiercely. Did something bad happen when you were delivering pizzas? She asked, pulling back to study his face. Michael touched her cheek gently. His brave, perceptive little girl. How could he tell her that her world was about to change? That she might have a brother, but his presence could bring a storm of conflict into their quiet life. He just held her tighter, his mind racing with all that lay ahead. For now, this moment was enough. Holding his daughter close, gathering strength from her innocent love, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges he never expected to face. Morning sunlight streamed through the small kitchen window of Michael's modest apartment. The smell of pancakes and bacon filled the air as he stood at the stove, expertly flipping a golden brown pancake while keeping an eye on the sizzling bacon. Behind him, Lily sat at their worn wooden table, her legs swinging beneath her chair as she colored in her notebook. Daddy, why were you so late last night? Lily asked, not looking up from her drawing. Was it because of the fancy house? Michael's hand paused mid-flip. He turned off the burner and carried the last pancake to Lily's plate, watching as her eyes lit up at the Mickey Mouse shape he'd created. Taking a deep breath, he sat down across from her. Actually, sweetheart, something pretty amazing happened at that house. He reached across the table and gently took her small hand. Remember how you sometimes say you wish you had a brother or sister to play with? Lily nodded eagerly, her fork forgotten. Like Sarah at school. She has 2 brothers. Well, Michael smiled, his heart racing. I found out last night that you actually have a brother. His name is Daniel, and he's 7 years old. Lily's blue eyes grew wide as saucers. A real brother? For real? She bounced in her seat. Where is he? Can I meet him? Does he like to color too? Michael couldn't help but chuckle at her enthusiasm. Slow down, honey. Yes, he's real, and I think you'll meet him very soon. He lives in that big house we delivered pizza to last night. Just then, Michael's phone buzzed. Rebecca's name appeared on the screen, making his heart skip a beat. He answered, watching Lily demolish her Mickey Mouse pancake. Michael? Rebecca's voice was warm. I was hoping, would you and Lily like to come over today? Daniel hasn't stopped talking about meeting his sister. 2 hours later, Michael's old car crunched up the mansion's circular driveway. Lily pressed her face against the window, gasping at the enormous house. It's like a castle, Daddy. Rebecca and Daniel waited at the front door. The boy half hid behind his mother's legs, but his eyes were fixed on Lily. Rebecca wore a simple sundress, her hair loose around her shoulders, so different from her formal attire the night before. Hi, Daniel said softly as they approached. Lily, never one for shyness, bounded forward. I'm Lily. I love your house. Do you want to play? Daddy says you're my brother. Daniel's face broke into a tentative smile. I have lots of games in the playroom. Can we go, Daddy? Please? Lily turned to Michael with pleading eyes. Rebecca laughed, the sound bringing back memories of summer afternoons and stolen kisses. The playroom's just upstairs. We can watch them from the sitting room. The children disappeared up the grand staircase, their footsteps echoing through the marble foyer. Michael followed Rebecca to a cozy sitting room with large windows overlooking the garden. It felt more lived in than the formal areas he'd seen last night. "Remember when we used to play Monopoly in your parents' garage?" Rebecca asked, settling onto a plush sofa. Michael sat nearby, smiling at the memory. "You always insisted on being the race car, and you always let me win." "I did not," Michael protested, then grinned. "Okay, maybe sometimes." Above them, they could hear the children's laughter and the sound of what seemed to be a heated game of "sorry." Rebecca's eyes softened as she listened. "I've never heard him laugh like that," she said quietly. "He's always been so careful, like he's trying to live up to the Shaw name." Through the open door, they watched Daniel and Lily sprawled on the playroom floor, surrounded by board games and toys. They had their heads together, whispering and giggling like they'd known each other forever. "Lily's the same way sometimes," Michael admitted, "trying so hard to be brave after losing her mom. But look at them now, just being kids." Hours passed as the children played. Michael and Rebecca shared stories of their high school days. Football games where she cheered and he played defensive back, study sessions that turned into makeout sessions, dreams they'd had before life pulled them in different directions. As afternoon turned to evening, Michael noticed Lily's eyes growing heavy. "We should probably head home," he said reluctantly. Rebecca walked them to the door, Daniel and Lily trailing behind, still chattering about their next playdate. As Michael helped a sleepy Lily with her jacket, Rebecca touched his arm. "We'll face them together," she whispered, squeezing his hand. Her touch sent warmth through his entire body. The drive home was quiet, with Lily fast asleep in the back seat. Michael glanced at her in the rearview mirror, her face peaceful, a small smile still playing on her lips. His heart felt fuller than it had in years, filled with a hope he'd almost forgotten existed. The church parking lot was nearly empty when Michael's old sedan pulled in beside Rebecca's sleek SUV. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as doubts crept in. What would people think, seeing him here with the wealthy Rebecca Shaw? Lily bounced in the back seat, already waving at Daniel through the car window. "Come on, Daddy!" Lily tugged at his sleeve. "Daniel's waiting." Buzz. Michael took a deep breath and stepped out into the crisp morning air. Rebecca stood by the church steps in simple jeans and a sweater, looking more relaxed than he'd ever seen her at the mansion. Daniel held her hand, but quickly broke free to run to Lily. "I helped sort cans yesterday," Daniel announced proudly to Lily. "Want to see?" Rebecca walked over to Michael, a gentle smile on her face. "Thank you for coming. I know this might feel uncomfortable." "Just different," Michael said, watching the children race ahead. "Good different, I think." Inside the church basement, folding tables lined the walls, loaded with donated food. Volunteers in aprons moved between shelves, preparing bags for families in need. A few heads turned as they entered, whispers following in their wake. Michael spotted Mr. Jenkins, an elderly veteran he sometimes delivered pizzas to, struggling with a heavy box. Without hesitation, he jogged over. "Here, let me help you with that, sir." "Turner! Didn't expect to see you here," Mr. Jenkins smiled, letting Michael take the weight. "Though I should have known, you're always helping folks." As Michael carried the box to Mr. Jenkins's car, he could feel Rebecca's eyes following him. When he returned, she was organizing canned goods with the children, teaching them to check expiration dates. The simple activity had both kids giggling. "Mr." Turner called Mrs. Martinez, who ran the pantry. "That cart's been squeaking for weeks. You're good with fixes. Would you mind taking a look?" Michael found himself sliding under the metal cart, using his delivery job experience to tighten loose wheels. Nearby, a group of young children watched with fascination. He started making silly car noises as he worked, sending them into fits of laughter. "Vroom, vroom, this cart's almost ready for the Indianapolis 500, he called out, making Lily and Daniel collapse in giggles too. Throughout the morning, Michael noticed the initial whispers fading into warm greetings. People seemed to see past his worn jeans and Rebecca's designer watch, focusing instead on their willing hands and kind words. Even Mrs. Peterson, known for her sharp tongue about those Shaw people, softened when she saw Rebecca patiently helping her count items for her grocery list. By afternoon, the four of them had fallen into an easy rhythm, sorting, packing, and sharing stories. Michael caught Rebecca watching him several times, her eyes soft with something that made his heart skip. "Anyone hungry?" he asked as they finished up. "I know this great little diner around the corner." The Bell's Diner booth was cramped for four, but somehow that made it perfect. Lily and Daniel shared a chocolate milkshake, their heads bent together as they drew on the paper placemats. Rebecca looked completely at home despite the worn vinyl seats, laughing at Michael's terrible dad jokes. "Remember when we used to come here after football games?" she asked, stealing one of his French fries. "Hey, some things never change," Michael grinned, pushing the plate between them. "You always stole my fries then, too." The children's chatter, the familiar comfort food, and Rebecca's smile. It all felt right in a way Michael hadn't experienced since losing his wife. Here, in this simple diner, they weren't a wealthy widow and a struggling delivery driver. They were just a family sharing dinner. After the meal, the kids were yawning. "Why don't I take them to the car?" offered Rebecca's driver, who'd been waiting discreetly outside. "You two catch up." Michael and Rebecca walked slowly down the quiet street, streetlights casting warm pools of light on the sidewalk. The evening air was cool, carrying the first hints of autumn. "I've missed this," Rebecca said softly. "Missed you." Michael stopped walking, turning to face her. "Beck?" The old nickname slipped out naturally. "I never stopped." "Loving you?" she finished, her voice barely a whisper. "Neither did I. Even when I thought I should, even when everyone told me to forget, I couldn't." Under the gentle glow of the streetlight, Rebecca's eyes shimmered with tears. Michael reached up, brushing one away with his thumb. The gesture was so familiar, so right, that it made his chest ache. "All these years," he murmured, "and you're still the most beautiful person I've ever known, inside and out." Rebecca stepped closer, her hand finding his. "I was so wrong, Michael. Wrong to let fear and other people's expectations drive us apart. Wrong not to tell you about Daniel." "We can't change the past," Michael said gently, "but maybe we can build something new?" Her eyes met his, full of hope and something deeper. Michael didn't answer with words. Instead, he leaned down and kissed her, soft and sweet, years of unspoken love flowing between them. The streetlight above wrapped them in its warm glow, as if blessing this moment of healing and new beginnings. Later that night, Michael tucked Lily into bed, her eyes already heavy with sleep. She clutched her favorite stuffed rabbit, a thoughtful look on her face. "Daddy," she murmured. "Yes, sweetheart? Are we going to have a bigger family?" Michael smiled, pulling her blanket up and kissing her forehead. "Maybe, sweetheart." The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of Rebecca's study, casting warm rectangles of light across the polished hardwood floor. Dust motes danced in the golden beams, creating an almost ethereal atmosphere that seemed to mock the gravity of their conversation. Michael sat stiffly in an oversized leather chair that had clearly been chosen for its imposing presence rather than comfort. His work uniform replaced by his best button-down shirt, the one he saved for parent-teacher conferences and church services. The crisp white cotton felt foreign against his skin, a reminder of how out of place he was in this world of antiques and inherited wealth. Rebecca moved with nervous energy behind her mahogany desk, her heels clicking softly against the floor as she paced. The room reflected her dual nature. Formal oil paintings of stern-faced Shaw ancestors lined the walls, while framed photos of Daniel sat beside a simple ceramic mug that read "World's Best Mom" in childish crayon letters. The contrast between old money formality and maternal warmth created an atmosphere both intimate and intimidating. "Daniel's private school has an excellent counselor," Rebecca said, her voice carrying the practiced calm of someone accustomed to difficult conversations. She shuffled through a collection of glossy brochures, their edges trembling slightly between her fingers. "She specializes in helping children navigate family transitions. She can help us explain everything to him gradually, at a pace he can understand." Her fingers lingered on a photograph of the school's manicured grounds, complete with tennis courts and a chapel. Michael could see the price reflected in every perfectly trimmed hedge and marble column. She handed him the expensive papers, and he caught the faint scent of her perfume, the same one she'd worn in high school, vanilla with hints of jasmine. Michael nodded thoughtfully, studying the school's impressive campus photos. Children in pressed uniforms walked in orderly lines across emerald lawns. Everything looked pristine, untouchable. Lily's public school is good too, he said carefully, his voice gentle but carrying an undertone of uncertainty. Really good, actually. They have a wonderful art program, and the teachers know every child by name. Maybe we could look into having them both there? It might be easier for Daniel to adjust with his sister nearby, someone who understands what he's going through. Rebecca's face softened, the tension around her eyes easing. She'd forgotten how Michael always thought of others first, how he could find practical solutions wrapped in compassion. That's so thoughtful of you, Michael. You always did see the bigger picture. She moved around the desk and settled into the chair across from him, their knees almost touching in the intimate space. The most important thing is that the children feel secure through all this chaos. They didn't ask for any of this mess. The afternoon light caught the worry lines around her eyes, and Michael noticed how her hands twisted the simple gold bracelet she wore, a nervous habit from their teenage years that had apparently survived 2 decades and a marriage. "Have you started the paperwork for shared custody?" Michael asked, leaning forward slightly. His voice carried the careful tone of someone walking through a minefield. "I know it's complicated with the Shaws and everything, but—" "My lawyer is drawing up the preliminary documents," Rebecca interrupted softly, reaching across the narrow space to squeeze his hand. Her fingers were warm but trembling. "We'll make this work, Michael. I promise you. Daniel deserves to know his father, his real father. He deserves to understand where he comes from, who he really is." The weight of her words settled between them like a bridge spanning 20 years of separation. Michael felt a flicker of hope ignite in his chest, the same feeling he'd had when Lily took her first steps or spoke her first word. A sharp knock at the study door shattered the moment like glass. Both of them jumped, their hands separating as if they'd been caught doing something forbidden. Martha, the elderly housekeeper who'd been with the Shaw family for 30 years, entered with an apologetic expression etched into her weathered features. "I'm terribly sorry to interrupt, Mrs. Shaw," Martha said, wringing her hands in her starched apron, "but there's someone here to see you." "A Mr. Patterson from Blackwell and Associates. He says it's urgent." Her voice carried a warning that made Rebecca's spine straighten. Rebecca's face drained of color, becoming as pale as the expensive wallpaper behind her. "Blackwell and Associates," she whispered. "That's the Shaw's law firm, the one they use for—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Before either of them could respond, a tall man in an immaculate charcoal suit stepped past Martha with the confidence of someone accustomed to intimidating people. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his Italian leather shoes gleamed, and his briefcase looked like it cost more than Michael's monthly rent. Everything about him screamed expensive legal trouble. "Mrs. Shaw. Mr. Turner." He nodded curtly, his pale eyes taking in every detail of the scene, their proximity, their obvious distress, the scattered school brochures. "I apologize for the interruption, but I have some documents that require your immediate attention." He placed a thick manila envelope on the desk with the deliberate care of someone delivering a bomb. Rebecca's hands shook visibly as she picked up the envelope. The Shaw family crest was embossed on the expensive stationery, and Michael could see her recognition of it in the way her shoulders sagged. She opened it with trembling fingers, her eyes scanning the first page with growing horror. "No," she gasped, her voice barely audible. "They can't. They wouldn't dare." Michael stood immediately, moving to read over her shoulder. The legal language was deliberately dense and intimidating, but certain phrases jumped out like physical blows. Petition for emergency full custody, demonstration of clear and present parental unfitness, immediate temporary guardianship pending psychological evaluation, protection of minor child's emotional and financial welfare. The papers included photographs, surveillance photos of Michael entering and leaving Rebecca's house, pictures of him in his pizza delivery uniform, shots of his modest apartment building. Someone had been watching them, documenting their every move. The Shaw family is deeply concerned about young Daniel's welfare during this transition period, Mr. Patterson said smoothly, his voice carrying the practiced neutrality of someone who destroyed lives for a living. They believe his best interests lie in maintaining the stability and security of his current social, educational, and financial environment. Surely you can understand their position. His best interests? Michael's voice rose, anger finally breaking through his shock. They're trying to keep me from my own son. They're trying to steal him. They've included character testimony, Rebecca whispered, her voice breaking as she flipped through page after page of legal documents. From the country club board, the hospital foundation, the private school administrators. Her voice caught in her throat. They're claiming I'm emotionally unstable, that my judgment is compromised by romantic delusions and middle-age desperation. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat delicately. The Shaw family wants you to know they're prepared to be exceptionally generous in their settlement offers should you both choose to cooperate with this transition. There's no need for this to become unnecessarily adversarial. Get out! Rebecca's voice had turned to ice, each word sharp enough to cut. She stood slowly, her whole body rigid with fury. Tell the Shaws they can't buy their way out of this. Tell them that some things, some people, aren't for sale. The lawyer's expression never changed. I'll relay your message, Mrs. Shaw. But I should warn you, the Shaw family has considerable resources and influence. This could become very unpleasant for everyone involved. He picked up his briefcase and headed for the door. The temporary custody hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. I trust you'll have legal representation. After the door closed behind him, Rebecca collapsed back into her chair as if her strings had been cut. They're moving so fast, Michael, she whispered, staring at the papers spread across her desk like evidence at a crime scene. They've already started their campaign. This morning, 2 board members from the Children's Hospital Foundation suggested I take a temporary break from my duties. They said it would be best for everyone until this unfortunate situation resolves itself. Michael began pacing the length of the study, his hands running through his hair in frustrated gestures. We'll fight this, he said, his voice growing stronger with each word. We'll get our own lawyers. We'll show them that money isn't everything, that... A commotion from downstairs cut through his words like a knife. Martha's voice rose in sharp protest, followed by the heavy, measured footsteps of multiple people climbing the main staircase. Rebecca rushed to the study door just as 2 uniformed police officers appeared in the hallway, accompanied by Mr. Patterson and a distinguished older man in an expensive overcoat, James Shaw, Rebecca's former father-in-law and patriarch of the Shaw dynasty. What is the meaning of this? Rebecca demanded, her voice echoing in the vaulted hallway. How dare you bring police into my home? We have a temporary emergency custody order signed by Judge Morrison less than an hour ago, the first officer said uncomfortably, holding out official papers with the court seal. Daniel Shaw is to be placed immediately in the custody of his legal guardians, pending the outcome of the formal custody hearing. No! Rebecca's cry echoed through the mansion, bouncing off marble walls and crystal chandeliers. You can't take him! He's my son! He's my baby! Where's the boy? James Shaw asked, his voice carrying the cold authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. His gray eyes swept the scene with obvious disdain, taking in Michael's humble appearance and Rebecca's tear-streaked face. He's at his piano lesson, Martha whispered, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. Down the street at Mrs. Peterson's house. He'll be home in 20 minutes. Michael stepped forward, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. This isn't right, he said, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. You can't just storm in here and tear a family apart. There are procedures. We can and we will. James Shaw cut him off with icy precision. Officer, please retrieve the child immediately. Mrs. Peterson's address is 1247 Elm Street. The next 30 minutes crawled by like hours of pure torture. Daniel was brought home in a police car, his small face pressed against the window in confusion and terror. Rebecca tried to explain through her sobs while the officers stood awkwardly by, clearly uncomfortable with their role in this family drama. Michael watched helplessly as Rebecca knelt beside her son, trying to smooth his dark hair and reassure him through her own breakdown. "Mommy, why are the police here?" Daniel's voice quivered as he clutched his music book to his chest. "Did I do something wrong?" "I practiced my scales just like Mrs. Peterson said." "No, sweetheart," Rebecca whispered, pulling him close. "You didn't do anything wrong. You're perfect, my beautiful boy. Sometimes grown-ups have to work things out and—" "Mrs. Shaw," James Shaw interrupted, his voice cutting through her explanation, "the child needs to gather his things. A car is waiting." "I don't want to go with him," Daniel said, his voice rising to a wail. "I want to stay with Mommy. I want to stay home." Rebecca tried to follow as James Shaw guided Daniel firmly toward the front door, but Mr. Patterson stepped smoothly between them. "Any interference with a court order could result in criminal charges, Mrs. Shaw. I strongly suggest you comply with the legal process." Michael watched in helpless fury as the little boy was led away, his small backpack bouncing against his back with each reluctant step. Daniel kept turning around, reaching for his mother, his cries echoing in the grand foyer until the massive front door closed with a final, terrible thud. After the police cars disappeared down the long driveway, Rebecca crumpled to the marble floor of her own home, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than grief. Michael knelt beside her on the cold stone, his own eyes burning with tears he refused to let fall. The empty mansion echoed with the absence of Daniel's voice, every room suddenly feeling like a mausoleum. "They planned this," Rebecca whispered against Michael's shoulder. "Every move, every word. They've been preparing for this moment since the day you walked into that dinner party." Hours later, Michael sat in his car in his own driveway, his head pounding with exhaustion and defeat. The familiar sight of his modest duplex, with its peeling paint and small front yard, had never felt more humble or more precious. The porch light was on. Mrs. Johnson from next door had stayed with Lily as promised. Through the window, he could see his daughter's silhouette moving around the living room, probably organizing her toys or working on a puzzle. The front door opened before he reached it, as if Lily had been watching for his headlights. She stood there in her favorite pajamas, the ones with dancing cats, her face bright with innocent curiosity and excitement. "Daddy!" she called out, her voice full of joy. "You're home. Is Daniel coming for a sleepover soon? You said maybe he could come this weekend. I already picked out games we could play." Michael's throat tightened as he lifted her into his arms, feeling the warm weight of her small body against his chest. Her hair smelled like strawberry shampoo and childhood dreams. How could he explain this to her? How could he tell her that her newfound brother had been taken away, possibly forever? "Why are you sad, Daddy?" Lily's small hand touched his cheek with the gentle wisdom that children sometimes possess. "Your eyes look funny. When can Daniel come play again? I want to show him my butterfly collection." Michael carried her inside their small but warm home, holding her close, struggling to find words that wouldn't shatter her innocent heart the way his had been broken today. The weight of her trust, her simple questions, her unshakable faith in happy endings felt heavier than all the legal documents and Shaw family money combined. In the distance, thunder rumbled, promising another storm was coming. The kitchen clock ticked past midnight, its soft rhythm matching Michael's heavy sighs. Bills and court papers covered his small kitchen table like fallen autumn leaves, each one a reminder of the mountain he faced. The single bulb overhead cast harsh shadows across the documents, making the words seem even more threatening than they were in daylight. Michael's shoulders slumped as he studied his bank statement for the 100th time. The numbers hadn't changed. His delivery job and weekend handyman work barely covered their basic needs. How could he possibly fight the Shaw family's team of expensive lawyers? A legal document caught his eye, the temporary custody order that had torn Daniel away. His vision blurred as tears welled up. He'd promised his son he wouldn't leave, yet here he sat, powerless to keep that promise. The same system that was supposed to protect families was being used as a weapon against his. The tears fell silently onto the papers. Michael covered his face with rough, calloused hands, his body shaking with quiet sobs. The weight of it all, the impossible odds, the heartbreak in Daniel's eyes when the police came, Rebecca's devastation, crashed over him like a tidal wave. "Daddy?" Lily's small voice cut through his despair. Michael quickly wiped his eyes, but not fast enough. His daughter stood in the kitchen doorway in her favorite unicorn pajamas, her stuffed rabbit clutched tight against her chest. "Hey, sweetheart," he managed, trying to steady his voice. "What are you doing up?" "It's way past bedtime." Lily patted across the cold linoleum in her sock feet. "I heard you crying." She climbed onto his lap, something she hadn't done since she was much younger. Her small hand reached up to touch his wet cheek. "Is it because of Daniel?" Michael pulled her close, breathing in the sweet smell of her strawberry shampoo. "Yeah, baby. It's about Daniel. And about how sometimes daddies can't fix everything, no matter how much they want to." Lily was quiet for a moment, considering this with the serious thoughtfulness that often surprised him. Then she pulled back to look him in the eyes. "Remember when I wanted to quit soccer because Jenny said I wasn't good enough?" Michael nodded, wondering where this was going. "You told me we don't give up just because something's hard." Lily's voice grew stronger. "You said we fight for what matters. You said that's what family does." She squeezed his hand in both of hers. "Daddy, you always told me we fight for family. Don't stop now." Michael's breath caught in his throat. Out of the mouth of babes, they said. Here was his 8-year-old daughter teaching him about courage and persistence. He hugged her tightly, feeling strength flow back into his spirit. "When did you get so wise, little one?" "I learned from you," she whispered into his shirt. Michael held her until she fell asleep against his chest, her quiet breathing a reminder of everything worth fighting for. He carried her back to bed, tucking her in with extra care. Returning to the kitchen, he looked at the scattered papers with new eyes. The odds hadn't changed, but something in him had. Lily was right. He'd always taught her to stand up for what mattered. How could he do any less? His phone buzzed early the next morning. Rebecca's name flashed on the screen. "Michael?" Her voice was thick with emotion but determined. "I couldn't sleep. I've been thinking. We can't let them win, not like this." "I was just thinking the same thing," Michael replied, relief flooding through him. "But Rebecca, they have so much money, so many connections." "And we have the truth," she cut in firmly. "We have love. We have what's right. I don't care what they say about me anymore. I won't let them keep Daniel from his real father." They agreed to meet with a lawyer that afternoon. The only one they could afford was Harold Matthews, whose small practice occupied the floor above the local hardware store. His office smelled of old coffee and dusty law books, but his eyes were sharp and kind as he reviewed their case. "I won't sugarcoat this," Matthews said, leaning back in his creaky chair. "The Shaws have resources we can only dream of. They'll bring in expert witnesses, character assassins, probably even try to dig up dirt from your past." He looked at them both seriously. "It's going to be an uphill battle every step of the way." Michael straightened in his chair. The fear was still there, but now it was fuel rather than a weight. He thought of Lily's words, of Daniel's hug, of Rebecca's strength. "I'll fight until my last breath for my children," he declared, his voice steady and sure. Harold Matthews studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "That right there. That's what we need to show the judge. Not their money, not their influence, but a father's love." He began pulling out forms. "Let's get to work." The afternoon sun slanted through the dusty office windows as they started building their case, one piece at a time. Michael knew the road ahead would be hard, but Lily's words echoed in his heart. "We fight for family. Don't stop now." The mahogany doors of courtroom 7 felt heavy as Michael pushed them open. His worn suit jacket, borrowed from a neighbor, scratched against his neck. The room buzzed with whispers as he and Rebecca made their way to their table, their small-town lawyer shuffling papers beside them. Across the aisle, the Shaw family filled the first 2 rows, their designer clothes in perfect postures, a stark contrast to Michael's humble appearance. Their team of lawyers, armed with leather briefcases and tablets, spread documents across their table with military precision. Michael's hands trembled slightly as he sat down. Rebecca reached over and squeezed his fingers, her touch warm and steady. "Together," she whispered, echoing their promise from weeks ago. The bailiff's voice boomed through the room. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Martha Wilson." As everyone stood, Michael caught sight of Mrs. Peterson, the elderly church volunteer sitting near the back. Next to her was Tom, the veteran from the food pantry, his medals pinned proudly to his jacket. Several familiar faces from the mansion staff had slipped in quietly, keeping their distance from the Shaws but offering Michael encouraging nods. "You may be seated," Judge Wilson said, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. "We're here today regarding the custody of Daniel Shaw." "Let's proceed." The Shaw's lead attorney, Mr. Harrison, rose first. His voice dripped with practiced concern as he painted a picture of Michael's life. "Your Honor, Mr. Turner delivers pizzas for a living. His home is a small rental with just 2 bedrooms. He can barely afford his daughter's school supplies, let alone provide the quality of life Daniel Shaw deserves." Michael's stomach clenched as Harrison displayed photos of his apartment building, his old car, his pizza delivery uniform. Is this the environment we want for a child who has known nothing but stability and privilege? The morning crawled by as witness after witness from the Shaw's side testified about the family's wealth, influence, and social standing. They spoke of private schools, trust funds, and summer homes, all the things Michael could never provide. During a brief break, Michael watched Lily coloring quietly in the back row, supervised by Mrs. Peterson. His daughter looked up and gave him a thumbs up, her smile bright and unwavering. It filled him with renewed strength. When court resumed, their lawyer called their first witness, Tom, the veteran from the food pantry. "Mr. Turner didn't know I was watching that day," Tom said, his voice gravelly but clear. "He thought nobody saw him give his lunch to a homeless teenager or stay late to fix our broken cart. He didn't do it for show. That's just who he is." Mrs. Peterson spoke next, describing how Michael volunteered despite working 2 jobs. "He brings Lily with him to teach her about helping others. That girl has learned more about character from her father than any fancy school could teach." Maria, one of the mansion's maids, nervously approached the stand. She glanced at the Shaws before speaking. "I've worked there for 12 years. When Mr. Turner delivered pizzas, he was the only person who looked me in the eye, who asked my name. He treats everyone with respect, no matter who they are." The testimony that followed painted a different picture than the Shaw's carefully crafted narrative. The church youth pastor described Michael coaching Little League despite his exhausting schedule. A teacher spoke about his involvement in Lily's education, attending every parent meeting despite having to swap shifts. Then came the moment Michael dreaded most. Lily's turn to speak. His 8-year-old daughter walked to the front, her small shoes clicking against the floor. She had insisted on wearing her best dress, the one they'd found at the thrift store. "My daddy works really hard," she said, her voice small but steady. "Sometimes he's tired, but he never misses story time. When I was sick last winter, he slept in a chair by my bed for 3 nights. She looked directly at the judge. "I want Daniel to be my brother. Daddy has enough love for both of us." Michael blinked back tears as Lily returned to her seat. Rebecca's hand found his again, her fingers intertwining with his. The Shaw's lawyer tried to dismiss these testimonies as emotional manipulation. "Sentiment doesn't pay for college," he argued. "Good intentions don't provide the advantages Daniel needs." But then Rebecca stood up, her voice clear and strong. "I grew up with those advantages," she said. "I had everything money could buy, but I was lonely. What Daniel needs, what any child needs, is love, integrity, and parents who see them as more than just heirs to a fortune." As the afternoon wore on, more people spoke, neighbors, co-workers, even the owner of the pizza shop who described Michael's dedication and reliability. Each story added another piece to the puzzle of Michael's character. The Shaws sat increasingly rigid in their seats as the testimony continued. Their carefully constructed argument about wealth and privilege seemed to shrink in the face of so many stories about love, sacrifice, and genuine care for others. Finally, Judge Wilson called for a recess. "I'll review the testimony and return with my decision in 1 hour," she announced, rising from her bench. Michael felt drained as he stepped into the courthouse hallway. The morning's confidence had given way to nervous exhaustion. Rebecca held his hand tightly as they found a quiet corner away from the crowds. "No matter what happens," Rebecca said softly, her eyes meeting his, "we fought for love." Michael nodded, unable to speak. Through the window, he could see Lily and Mrs. Peterson sitting on a bench in the courthouse garden, sharing a sandwich. His daughter's faith in him had never wavered, and that meant everything. The hallway filled with murmuring voices as they waited. The Shaws huddled with their lawyers at one end, while Michael's supporters gathered quietly at the other. The distance between the two groups seemed to represent everything this case was about. Not just wealth versus poverty, but different values, different ways of seeing what mattered in life. Rebecca leaned her head against Michael's shoulder, and they sat in silence, holding onto each other and waiting for whatever came next. Judge Harrison adjusted her glasses, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the hushed courtroom. Her weathered hands held the papers that would determine the fate of a family. After careful consideration of all testimony and evidence presented, she began, her voice steady and clear. "This court finds that the best interest of the child, Daniel Shaw, would be served through shared custody." A collective gasp filled the room. Michael's hands trembled as he gripped the wooden railing in front of him. Rebecca covered her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. "Mr. Thay, Michael Turner has demonstrated, through numerous character witnesses and documented evidence, that he possesses the moral character, dedication, and capability to be an active and positive presence in his son's life." The judge's eyes swept the room. While the Shaw family's financial resources are considerable, this court maintains that a child's well-being depends on more than material wealth. In the back of the courtroom, several of the mansion's staff members who had testified wiped their eyes. The elderly veteran Michael had helped at the food pantry, squeezed his wife's hand. "Therefore, I hereby grant joint custody to Michael Turner and Rebecca Shaw with equal parenting time and shared decision-making responsibilities regarding Daniel's upbringing." The moment the words left her lips, Daniel broke free from his grandmother's grip. He ran down the aisle, his small dress shoes clicking against the wooden floor. "Daddy!" he cried out, launching himself into Michael's arms. Michael caught him, lifting him high and pulling him close. His tears fell freely into Daniel's dark hair so much like his own. Lily darted forward from her seat, wrapping her arms around both of them. "We won, Daddy! We won!" Rebecca joined them, her elegant dress crumpling as she embraced her new family. They stood there, holding each other, their tears mixing with laughter. The sound of scattered applause echoed through the courtroom. The Shaw family rose quietly from their seats. Mrs. Shaw Sr. paused at the doorway, looking back at the scene. For a moment, her stern expression softened. Without a word, she turned and left, her family following behind. 6 months later, the bell above the door of Turner's family diner chimed cheerfully as another customer walked in. Sunshine streamed through the large windows, highlighting the freshly painted walls and the collection of family photos that decorated them. The smell of Michael's famous meatloaf filled the air. "Welcome to Turner's," Lily called out from behind the counter, where she was carefully arranging cookies on a display plate. Her brother Daniel stood beside her on a step stool, methodically filling salt shakers. "Table for two?" Daniel asked, grabbing menus with practiced ease. At 7 and 8 years old, they had become the diner's unofficial greeters, charming customers with their matching aprons and enthusiastic service. Rebecca emerged from the office, her reading glasses perched on her head. She'd traded her designer clothes for simple business wear, but she carried herself with the same grace she'd always possessed. The difference now was in her smile, genuine, unreserved, reaching all the way to her eyes. "Mrs. Johnson," she greeted the elderly customer, "your usual booth is ready. I think Michael's just pulled a fresh apple pie from the oven." In the kitchen, Michael worked with confident efficiency, his chef's coat bearing small traces of the day's specials. Through the service window, he could see his family moving through the diner, working together like a well-rehearsed dance. The diner had become more than just a business. It was the heart of their community. The walls held photos of local sports teams they sponsored, artwork from both children's schools, and snapshots of regular customers who had become like family. During a quiet moment between the lunch and dinner rush, Michael leaned against the counter, watching Lily teach Daniel how to make the perfect chocolate milkshake. Rebecca slid next to him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Remember that night?" she asked softly. "When you walked into the mansion with those pizzas?" Michael chuckled, wrapping an arm around her waist. "How could I forget? I thought I'd walked into some kind of dream or nightmare. The night you walked into that mansion, everything froze," Rebecca whispered, watching their children laugh together as Daniel accidentally splattered whipped cream on his nose. "But God had always planned for us to be here." Michael kissed her forehead tenderly, taking in the scene before him. The warm glow of the setting sun painted everything in soft gold. Lily was now teaching Daniel how to make a whipped cream smiley face on top of the shake, both of them giggling. Regular customers chatted comfortably at their usual tables, the elderly veteran and his wife sharing a piece of pie in their corner booth. The diner hummed with the sound of clinking plates, friendly conversation, and children's laughter. The sound of home. Not the cold marble halls of a mansion, but a place filled with light, love, and the kind of wealth that couldn't be measured in dollars. Through the window, Michael could see the Turner's Family Diner sign catching the last rays of sunlight. Below it, in smaller letters, was their motto, "Where everyone's family." Looking at his children's bright faces and feeling Rebecca's warm presence beside him, he knew they had found something far more precious than any fortune. They had found their way home. Breathe it in, because sometimes the strongest families are born from quiet after the storm, and the most extraordinary lives begin with the courage to start again. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from, and what part of Michael, Rebecca, Lily, and Daniel's journey resonated with you most? The frozen moment in the mansion, the courtroom fight, or the diner's new beginning? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your words inspire more than you know. If you believe in stories that heal, uplift, and remind us of the quiet strength in everyday people, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming next. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you for watching. Your time, your presence, your kindness, they mean the world. Until the next story, stay kind, stay brave, and never stop listening.